Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher baka bano miko ha'amin, v'nadlano et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha-Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who chose us from all the peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah. We're going to read from Genesis chapter 37, beginning in verse 1. Now Jacob lived in the land where his fathers had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. And the blessing after, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chaye olam natobitokenu, Baruch atah Adonai noten ha-Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, O Lord, the giver of truth. Amen. All right, hopefully everybody got notes. And I just want to touch on something right away here in the little portion I just read. One of the things I want us to remember is Joseph at this time. Joseph at this time is 17 years old. Now, we wonder why he would do the things that he did that irritated his brothers so much. Well, at 17, if I remember correctly, I was learning the social graces of life, coming into the point from changing from a child to being an adult, and I was probably an irritant to most people. Perhaps you might recall who you were when you were 17. You might have been an irritant to people as well. I can't say for sure, but it seems as though being 17, you may not have been as mature and as wise as you might think you are today. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up, one of those things I was looking at and realized. So what we have here, the era of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is now coming to a close. We're having a transition. This is a transitional chapter 37. This begins the life of Joseph, which takes us from chapter 37 all the way through chapter 50. Now, that is a large portion of Genesis, actually, when you consider it's focused on one individual. All of the patriarchs, the scripture was focused on them, but it kind of grabbed small little segments of their lives and amplified that. But here with Joseph, we have the whole story going on. I mean, it runs all the way through all of these chapters. So it's a little bit different. One of the things and why it seems to be different is patriarchs, like I said, they had bite-sized segments in which the scripture talked about them. This is a full-on story. Second, what the patriarchs experienced took place mostly in Canaan and Mesopotamia. This is taking place in Egypt. And on top of that, the way God deals with people seems to have changed with Joseph, at least for this interim. What God had dealt with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, he actually ministered to them one-on-one through an agent, of course, the angel of the Lord. But they actually communicated back and forth. Joseph does not have that. He is communicated to through dreams. And that's a big change that takes place, and we need to recognize that change.
You're not turned on. Oh, yes, you
We're messing with batteries a little bit here. So anyway, just to bring us up to this, Joseph never sees or hears God as his messenger personally. And like I said, Joseph has dreams. God seems to be working behind the scenes as well, working through divine providence, not necessarily openly out front, telling somebody to go here, to do this, to do that. So in our notes, number one in our notes, we have transition, that's a fill-in, transition from the era of the patriarchs to the life of Joseph. And there's two principles primarily that the scripture has been talking about up to this point. One of them is the principle of separateness, where things are divided, separated from one thing or another. We have the separation of the twins between Jacob and Esau. We have all kinds of separation that is going on between Abraham and Lot. And all of that is a big, big part of how God has been working through the patriarchs and through the people he's chosen to be his. And now we're coming to this place where we're talking about divine providence. In other words, divine providence, that's one of our fill-ins in A in our notes. It's two principles, separateness and divine providence. So God has been constantly dividing, separating, and electing people for himself for his own purpose. We saw that, of course, in the first chapters of Genesis. For those that are part of the modern church, if you will, this principle is primarily taught to us as sanctification, setting apart unto holiness, meaning God sets you apart to accomplish what he wants, to do the things that he has planned, and he separates you for that purpose. It's a calling, if you will. Matter of fact, this is one of the things I look at is just understanding that as it is in heaven, so on earth. That's the principle that's there. In other words, God wants things to operate his way as it is in heaven. He wants it to operate that way on the earth as well. Yeshua, of course, when he came and was here, we say this repeatedly, and we all should know it and understand it, of course. Yeshua basically regulated himself to only saying what he heard the Father saying and only doing what he saw the Father doing. And of course, we're talking about how he heard and saw in the spiritual realm. The idea here is that physical objects and events depicted in the scripture are a reflection of spiritual truth that exist in heaven. This is an important thing for us to never forget. My perspective of Scripture pretty much runs this way. All of the examples, the stories, everything that's taking place is to be a representation of how we are supposed to act between us and God, how God is trying to reveal to us how he functions, and it also reveals to us the patterns that establish those things that are going to be taking place in the future. We say this quite often, history repeats itself. Well, his story repeats itself as well. History really is his story when we're talking about biblical things. And so God does repeat what he has done and how he functions. And so, like, at this point, we're talking about Antichrist, and most people have the mistaken idea that there's one Antichrist, which is not true. 1 John chapter 3, I believe it is where we have the word Antichrist that's used in Scriptures, not used anywhere else. Everybody else talks about the beast, they talk about the false prophet, they talk about various things, but the Antichrist is referred to primarily by John, and he says there will be many Antichrists. And so throughout history, we have the example of multiple antichrists. We're getting ready tonight to begin Hanukkah. And one of the antichrist, if you will, representatives would have been Antiochus Epiphanes, the individual who decided that, well, I'm going to wipe out, this whole segment of the way, get rid of these people because they're contrary to what we believe, and they're resisting becoming Greeks, Hellenized Greeks. And so when we go down through history, we receive multiple antichrists. Today there are antichrists in operation. I've been pretty vocal about looking at two of them. Francis, Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, is operating as an antichrist today, in my opinion. There's this whole plethora of evidence that shows that. And then we have Prince Charles, who is now King Charles, who is also operating as an antichrist in accomplishing what is actually preparation for the beast. And, not to get off into that, but the beast from the very first centuries was always believed to be the Roman church that developed when the way was combined with Roman religion, pagan religion, and they began to mix and mingle everything together. And the concept being that as Caesar had absolute control, well, the leader of this new organization called the Universal Church, that's what Catholic means, that the Pope would have the same kind of authority and power. And the Pope then, having that kind of power, could change Scripture to say whatever he wanted it to say, and set the precedent for how we should worship, which is what they've done, and the Catholic Church is very clear about it. They absolutely say that Sunday, anybody that worships on Sunday is worshiping on Sunday under the authority of the Catholic Church. Yeah, you can read it in their writings. They say, we took the authority to change the day, and it is, I like this wording, this is their wording, not mine. They say, this is our mark over everybody that worships on Sunday. Now, just think that through and talk about the mark that the beast is going to bring, and all the things that are going on in the world today with trying to make Sunday law become effective worldwide. It's already started in Europe. Germany is doing it, and the German government is enforcing it. That's the beauty of what the Pope is trying to bring about. He's trying to bring about Sunday worship, and they say very clearly the Bible does never teach about Sunday worship to change from Shabbat, the seventh day, that it's under their authority that they have done this. So, we look at that as the work of the Antichrist in preparation for the beast. Will the beast be the institution of the Catholic Church? Well, it's very possible. Even though we talk about it being centrified into one person, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, all of us have opinions. We have all this stuff we put together, but we're not the first ones to come up with an idea that, we're at the last days and this is what's going to happen. I love what God tells us in Acts chapter 2, where he just simply says, why are men coming up with all these vain imaginations and ideas? He says there, he said, I have set my king on the throne. And he laughs at the plans of men. And what he does, he says, he gives room for men to repent. And if they don't repent, well, then he brings his wrath against them. So on one hand, we could be facing the reality of the final days and all this stuff is going to happen, or we could see once again God foiling the plans of men, and I don't care how many men or how big they are or how extraordinary everything is today, God can, if it's not in his timing, say, nope, we're not doing it now, and turn the whole thing around, and here we go. So I look at it and I go, you know what? We should always be prepared, but we should never panic. And to me, that's the bottom line. Why panic? Either God is in control, and if you're submitted to him, he's going to take care of you. You know, in Revelation it said those people that love the Lord, they didn't even consider their own life even unto death. Why? Because they knew that God had a plan for them that was an eternal plan. This is not our eternal plan here. Living on planet Earth will be a finalized event at some point. Okay, Frank.
In regards to Sunday worship that the Catholic Church instituted, I read somewhere that they did that to weaken the Jews' religion, because they were afraid that the Jewish people were the competition to the Catholics.
Well, more than to do that to the Jewish community, it is a direct affront to the authority of God. And that's what we have to look at. It's not just between one institution and another. It's actually the ultimate authority of who has the authority to determine what the world ought to be doing. And that's always going to be Yahweh. Always going to be. But the enemy is constantly undermining it. He undermines it right, well, even lower than this, between children and parents. What's the idea? Children are supposed to be obedient to parents. Why? So that you will be blessed of God and live long upon the earth. Right at that point, you can start there, and then you come up between marriages, between husbands and wives. Satan is always working to destroy marriage. It's the institution that keeps the family together. And what's the family? Well, as we've learned over and over, the family is the whole concept of why everything that we read in the Bible is placed in order. The very first word in the Bible begins with what letter? The Beit. So if we remember the shape of the letter, it's shaped like a house, and it has shelter. And so inside the house, what is God wanting to do? He's wanting to establish a family, a home, so a family can be there. He wants a family. The whole concept is mankind is supposed to come to the maturity level where we become the family of God. And Satan does everything to destroy the family. I mean, from the children to the adults. I mean, the whole concept of even men and women. You know, you can't tell who's a man, who's a woman. Gee, really? I think God made it fairly clear. We get to Hanukkah, and one of the major things about the Hellenistic movement was that the Olympics were participated in the nude. And so if you happen to be Jewish, guess what? Oh, well, that's a Jewish participant over there. They could tell because of circumcision. And so those that wanted to blend into the Hellenistic Greek culture, because it was a culture moving throughout the whole world, they wanted to get away from circumcision because it identified them as belonging to God and not belonging to the world. So, I mean, when we think these things through, we begin to see evidence popping up everywhere indicating that Satan is absolutely trying to destroy mankind that has any relevance or any relationship with Yahweh whatsoever. So, we can't go there. I don't have enough time today to stay there too long. But we're going to talk about sex later. So those of you who are interested, just stay tuned. We'll get to sex in a little while. Sex is always exciting to talk about. And so usually people perk up and they go call their neighbors, and we'll have more people coming on here in a minute. As soon as you hear about this stuff. And let me say this. The reason sex is such a big issue in the church, especially, you have to go all the way back to Gnosticism to understand why. Gnosticism, the perspective of Gnosticism was and remains that the physical is wicked, evil, unclean. And so, obviously, when sex is involved, that's a very physical activity. Even though God says, yeah, it's physical, but boy, is it ever spiritual as well. So, we'll get to that discussion in a little while. So, what we have here, in talking about the fact that Joseph was 17 years of age, be in our notes, Joseph's story. We can talk about youthful exuberance and family intrigue. I mean, you have a 17-year-old kid who's having extraordinary dreams, and he can't keep it to himself. It's like, hey, guess what? And of course, there's already the family intrigue, because you have his dad who fathered him and Benjamin through his favorite wife, Rachel, and all the other kids are fathered through Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah. And so you got these two kids, and Joseph, being the older of the two kids, he is a major threat to the whole family dynamic. Because being the favorite of the father even gave him a robe. And what we don't pick up sometimes in the text is that robe is actually a royal robe. And it's a big deal robe. It's like, there he is. That's the one. Well, you have all of these sons of Leah, Reuben being the firstborn, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, all of them, the sons of Leah, the wife that has produced multiple children. And then you have Rachel, who didn't produce any children until way, way down the line. And, these brothers are looking at Dad's perspective towards Joseph, and it's like, is he going to bypass everybody and give the family blessing to Joseph and overlook all of us? And that was a real possibility. And so all of the brothers, because of Joseph, I mean, he's 17, he's got all this exuberance going on, and he is the favorite of the father. There's no denying, it's right in your face. They were always looking at him as being problematic. And so when it says, the brothers hated him, they couldn't even say shalom to him. It couldn't even give him the normal greeting. That's just a polite greeting. Here comes that whatever. Let's get rid of him once and for all. We're out here in the boonies. Let's get rid of him. And so that became a real problem. So what we have here is going on is divine providence. We better define that, I guess. The idea is that God is working behind the scenes to bring about his fixed will, even though it seems like he's not there at all. You don't see him, but he is orchestrating events that take place that fulfill his intended purpose. And we can look at it and go, well, here he is, somebody's trying to get on.
Yeah.
We can look at it and say, okay, well, sending Joseph out to find his brothers who hate him, when they see him coming, they're already going, let's kill this guy and get rid of him entirely. And, is that really the best idea? I mean, on the way, and this is a verse I wanted to talk about, make sure I don't forget this one. In verse 15, when he's sent out to look for his brothers, it says here, a man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, what are you looking for? Now, we read that, and we don't pay any attention to it, because we know he's looking for his brothers. But there's not a verse in Scripture that doesn't have something unique about it that we need to pay better attention to. Joseph absolutely foreshadows Yeshua. And as we all know, in the month of Elul, we have Yeshua, who is described, at least the king is coming, is described as being in the field. Why is he in the field? He's in the field, let's say this is rabbinical, but he's in the field, and what is he looking for? He's there to talk to the people. He's there to be with the people. Well, when you read in Luke chapter 18, verse 8, we go over there and we go, I tell you what, he will bring about justice for them quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Now, for years I've asked myself, what is this verse trying to communicate? I mean, why are they asking? Why did a man find him? He was wandering in the field. Okay, well, he's looking, but wandering in the field carries a different connotation than he's looking for his brothers. I mean, if you're looking, you don't see him, you move on from this field. But here is described as he's wandering in the field. And I'm thinking, why is he wandering? What's the deal? And the guy asked him, what are you looking for? Well, this morning when I woke up, literally, the Lord gave me this verse. Well, will he find faith on the earth when he comes? Yahweh is looking on the earth now. We get that all the time. In Zechariah, when the angel of the Lord is there with the horsemen, and they're in the ravine. Why are they there? They're there to see what the nations are doing and how they're treating Israel. And, here we have Joseph wandering in the field and realizing that everything has something to do with Yeshua when you're talking about Joseph. The Lord finally graciously gave me an idea, and I look at it and I go, you know what? That's the better idea, the best idea I've ever come up with. And it wasn't mine, it was his, so I figured probably a lot of truth in it. When he is coming, what's he going to be looking for? And what make a determination about, is this time we're in right now, is this going to be the time of the last? Because if he's coming and he's looking for faith, he's not going to act, in my opinion, until faith is found. In other words, if all of us are freaking out, we have no faith in the fact that God is in control, that he literally is doing this, that we're up off our fannies when it's time to be in worship and service, and we're actually saying, Lord, speak to me that I might encourage my brother and my sister, that I'm up and actively engaged and functioning as a real son of God. Why would he come? Why would he come? And everybody's not in faith, and he doesn't find faith on the earth. He's looking for faith, looking for men and women, his sons and daughters, that are absolutely alive. The light is on and it's shining brightly. And, for me, I mean, that's, I get excited from time to time. I'm not always excited, but from time to time I get excited. And I think, come on, people. We need to be those people of faith that are actively acting, walking, speaking, doing the same things that Yeshua did. The same things. Praying for the sick, raising the dead, working miracles, giving words of wisdom, words of knowledge, prophesying to one another. I mean, all the gifts of the Spirit should absolutely be exploding in our fellowship. There's really no excuse for it. The only excuse we have is people are like, well, yeah, somebody will do that. Hey, Pastor Paul, or, somebody, or Pastor Bruce, Pastor Kathleen, somebody will do it. No. The only reason we're here is to exhort the body to do the work of the ministry. That's the point. It's the whole body needs to rise up. I mean, if one or two of us are doing it, yeah, I mean, it's powerful, it's exciting, but imagine the whole body coming in and absolutely being focused on God is saying to us. And I mean, just, when you hold hands together, the power of God goes through that whole assembly, and everybody in that place knows it, feels it, experiences it. I mean, come on. Why do we bother to come to church? Why do we bother to attend the congregation? I mean, oh, well, I'm obligated because it's the day and I have to go, so I'll go, I'll spend my hour and a half in our congregation, our 3 hours, and, I'm good for the week. Really? Come on. We're more than that. When he comes, he's going to be looking for faith. And I believe he's looking for faith right now. And that's what's going to determine whether this is truly the end times or God is saying, no. The devil may think so. Those people may be thinking. The Antichrist may be at work. The beast is getting ready. But if there's not faith so I can bring my people, and I'm talking about a people. I mean, I get it. He got all the way down to 8 during the flood. Man, if he gets down to 8 now, we all have some problems. But I don't think it's going down to 8. Pastor?
Something to consider with that, the word says that the Lord always has his remnant.
He does.
So in a sense, there's already that faith present. I think the goal that should be ours is I want to join the remnant. I want to make sure I'm part of the remnant. Because the Lord always has his remnant. He's never without a people of faith. So I think we have to maybe think of it in that terminology where I need to plug myself into that group of
absolutely
the remnant. Just something to consider.
If we're going to do anything, to me, I mean, every little congregation, and our congregation in the overall general consensus of the world is a drop in the bucket. But you know what? The drops in the bucket actually add up to something when they join together. And joining into this and getting the vision and awakening to it, we can add to that. And we can be part of that, exactly. Yeah. Frank.
So being part of the remnant, I mean, when we receive you, when we get saved, is that our entry fee, or whatever?
Is that our what?
Is that when you?
Is that our entry fee? Is that what he said?
Yeah, you kind of.
Well, our entry fee is our acceptance of Yeshua.
Right.
But see, we're talking about what takes place here on this earth. What's taking place in heaven is a separate matter than what takes place here when we're talking about end times, because the world is going to be judged. Heaven is not going to be judged. The earth is. And what takes place here is really determined mostly by you and me rather than by God. God has already said what he's going to do. The real question is, what are we going to do? Are we going to be submitted to him or not? Pastor?
To Frank's question, I think we have to remember that when you get saved, that's entrance into heaven, eternal life. But when we read different portions of Scripture, we find out very clearly that there are different levels of heaven. For instance, there's going to be new heaven, new earth, and the people that live on the new earth are going to be able to go back and forth. The gates are always open, but the impression is they live on earth, whereas there's another group that lives in heaven, and then there's yet another group that is the bride. And we saw that even in the Lord's earthly ministry. He had concentric circles. He had his three around him, Peter, James, and John, and then he had the 12, all 12. Then he had the 70, and then we finally read after his resurrection, he's got 500. So these concentric circles give us an idea and a concept, I think, of that remnant. I don't believe that everybody that's saved is the remnant. Personally, I believe they're saved, but to this point of will the Lord find faith on the earth when he returns it, I shared this past weekend in the message the new poll out. I just read it this week. 29% of all born again Christians believe in reincarnation. Well, that's not faith. I'm not saying they're not believers. Believers can be all over the board in what they believe, and they are. But that's not biblical faith. That's India's faith or whatever, reincarnation is. So I think that the Lord is, the overall group is saved, but now you want to move in towards the center line, towards the Lord. Mm-hmm. And that becomes the bride, the remnant, and a disciple. Not all believers are even disciples. Because you have to make yourself a disciple. You have to choose to be a disciple, or you're just a follower. Mm-hmm. So is a follower of Messiah saved? Well, the followers got fed. See what I'm saying? But they weren't on the inner circles. So I think we have to remember that when we're looking at these things.
For me, when I read the Revelation, what you have is a series there that speaks about those that overcome. They overcome what? Yeah. See, you and I, we can float as it is, if you will, and I'm not real sure about that. I don't feel. Pastor and I have a somewhat different perspective on once saved, always saved. I truly believe that God is fully capable of saving people, and that's it. I have no problem with that. At the same time, when I pay attention to the Scripture, I find out that people can turn away. Their choice. How easy is that to do? I have no idea. I mean, I don't even know if what I'm feeling is absolute or not. I'm just concerned about it. But I do recognize that in the Revelation, when you read the first 7 chapters, those that overcome will be granted to sit with me in my throne, as Yeshua is saying, as I have overcome and is seated with my Father in his throne. Those that overcome will have a new name. Those that overcome will be a pillar in the house of God. So it indicates to me that we have a responsibility here, that we learn to be victorious over those things that are going on in this world. And as a reward of that, we will then be placed in a group that is identified as having a new name, as being a pillar in the house of God, as being seated in the throne. So it's very similar to what Pastor's saying, is inner circle, a larger outer circle, etc. How is it going to play out? I don't know, but I do know this. God expects things from us. And one of those things that I think he expects from us is, just as Joseph pre-patterned what Yeshua was going to be like, Yeshua has pre-patterned what you and I are supposed to be like. Remember, he said this. He said, you shall do greater things than what I have done, because now I go to the Father. And all of us, and every one of us sitting here, is like, we're just trying to attain doing the stuff that Yeshua did. We can't even comprehend doing greater things than what he has done. And yet, the prophecy is that we will. The question is when. I do know this. For me, anyway, this is how it's worked. When I first came to faith, I absolutely was on the opposite side of the road. I believed this whole thing was hooey. If you don't know what hooey is, watch where you walk. You could step in it. But the point being that I didn't believe it at all. When the light came on, then I wanted to know. I said, wait a minute. If this is true, I want to know the truth. So what's inspired me all the way to this very day is a search for truth. And it doesn't matter to me what the church teaches. I want to know the truth, because I've found out in my walk and relationship, half of what I learned when I went to college, when I went to seminary, when I have been working in churches, and I'm talking about Messianic as well as Christian, a great majority of it has not proven to be true. It's been traditional teaching. Oh, well, we believe this. And a lot of it comes right from the Roman Catholic teaching that the Sunday church follows and never questions it. And it just transfers over, and that's what I found. It transfers right over into the Messianic community as well. And the attitudes are there. Everything is there. And nobody's willing to look underneath the rocks and absolutely go back and say, you know what? There's more truth to this than what I've been taught. And for me, if I can inspire anybody in this group, at home or here or wherever, look, question. Don't be satisfied just because I, Pastor Bruce, pick somebody, has said this is the way it is. For us, it is the way it is because we've come to the conclusion based on our study and understanding. And, you know, Pastor Bruce and I, we will fight each other to the death over something if we think that we're right. We're just that kind of people. And I'm not talking literal. I'm just saying, you know, we're going to defend our position, and we're going to do it until the light comes on and one or the other of us goes, hey, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. All right? And that's what a midrash is, by the way. When you're in a midrash, you know, the rabbi's deal was, your idea is so wrong about this portion of Scripture, you're destroying the Torah. You know, and I mean, those are fighting words. But at the end of the day, at the end of the discussion, you go away, you think about what's been going on, you realize, hey, wait, this is my brother. We need to be in unity. I don't have to believe exactly like he believes, but we do have something in common, and that is Yahweh. And what does Yahweh expect from me? Does he want us to be divided? Not always. Not always. Sometimes we're divided. For example, those that got on the ark were absolutely divided from those that remained out of the ark. There was a separation, no doubt. So we do have to be careful. And so I try to think that way. Okay, is this keeping me off the ark or putting me on the ark? I mean, I want to be on the ark. I want to be part of the remnant. I want to be part of that group that God says, these are my beloved sons. You know, he already picked out one, said, this is my beloved son. As an example for us, we are supposed to be what? Beloved sons and daughters as well. And you read about that in the book of Hebrews. If you haven't studied it, you'll see it. Yes, Frank.
Is the remnant going to be, how would I say it, here left behind, left here after the believers are taken out in what they call the rapture? Is the remnant those that are going to stay on the planet here to neutralize the Antichrist?
Good question, but if you read that portion of Scripture, what does the Scripture indicate? When the question is asked, those that are taken, where are they taken? And if you read that carefully, you find out they are not taken to a place I want to go to. I mean, it's where the ravens are eating the carcasses. That's concerning to me. You know, people go, "Oh, that's the rapture." You know, you're welcome to give it a shot if you want, but I don't think I want that one. I want the one that the Lord's going to do, and if that means preserving me here to accomplish, then I'll be willing to be left behind to accomplish what God wants to have accomplished. On the other hand, if he has a different perspective and he wants to remove me and put me somewhere, you know what? As long as he's doing it, I'm good with it. But I'm not I was in the military. Volunteering for stuff you do not understand is stupid. You better know what you're volunteering for before you raise your little hand and go, okay, here I am. Now, with God, I will say this. My faith in my God is strong enough that he doesn't have to tell me. All he has to do is ask me, will you? All right, Lord, here I am, send me. Because I know with that commander-in-chief, he doesn't have an ulterior motive behind sending me into something. He has something for me to accomplish that benefits him. And you know what? If it costs me my life, my physical life, what difference does it make? It's easy to say that when you're feeling fine and you're not in the circumstance. I get it. Don't misjudge me and go, oh, what a hero, what a man of faith. Listen, I'd be crying, crawling on my knees, begging. I'll do all of that. But you know what? Bottom line is, if God has something and he communicates to me that he wants me to do something, I'm going to do it. Yes.
With the 140...
You want me to solve all your problems, Frank? Is that what you want?
Well, you know, you open up questions, so I'd like to ask them. I mean, you just finished saying the Midrash is not. So are the 144,000, where do they fit in?
You mean 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes?
Right.
Well, they fit in where 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes is put together.
Oh, that's a good answer.
And you want a more definitive answer? You got to go directly to the source. Say, God, will you explain this to me? And perhaps he will. I have opinions, as does everybody else. I do know this, as far as I know, every one of us is the product as far as I can tell, that came from the 8 that survived the flood. The mixture, the blending, wow. How do you pick out one cell out of all the cells in your whole body and identify that as going back to who? Beyond me. All I know is we're all generated from those 8 people. And from those 8 people, does that indicate that from the tribes we may have that connection and we could be part of the 12,000 from each tribe? Maybe, maybe, but that's beyond my pay grade and beyond my comprehension as to how to even formulate that concept. Pastor's got an idea.
Yeah, I think really all the word tells us about them in real clear cut is the idea that they're witnesses for the Lord. And our understanding is during the 7-year tribulation, God raises them up. Typically, because it says 12,000 from each tribe, we then assume that they're Jewish, from the Jewish tribes. But like Pastor Paul just said, there are problems with that idea because there's several different listings of the actual tribes in the Word, especially when you get into Revelation. There's we all go back to Noah's flood, if you believe that story. I mean, we all descended from the 8, right? So where does the Jew come in? The interesting thing with Jews is nobody can really define who a Jew is. A Jew is not a resident of Israel, necessarily. A Jew is not a religion, because more than not, most Jewish people aren't even religious. They're secular. Jews are not a nationality. They're not an ethnic group. Nobody can really define who a Jew is. And I think that was intentional on God's part, personally, because that way, because we have 2-house teaching, we have all sorts of teachings about the lost tribes, who the Jews are we now Israel? Are we now Jews? It gets very confusing. So I think the only thing we know for sure is their job description is to be witnesses.
Khazars?
Khazars? No, I haven't. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
Use your microphone so they can hear you online.
A friend of mine says that the Khazars are the ones that are populating Israel now, and I don't know where he said that there's a lot of people say that there's really, just like you're saying, there's no real Jews. They've all been.
The word that you're using, how do you spell that?
I don't even know. Khazars, I think it starts with a K. I just don't know.
There's a D in there somewhere. And maybe an R.
Okay. Because I don't know this word, so it's kind of like I'm not sure where we're at. Okay, Frank.
Okay, I guess.
Continuing on in chapter 37. What's that?
The difficult questions.
Yeah. Continuing on in chapter 37. First, we really need to get the idea that here we have Joseph in the beginning of this story. He's 17 years old, and he's never read How to Win Friends and Influence People. So, the way he approaches things is anything that he hears or sees in the spiritual realm, he just blurts it out. And it's good for the story, but it's not good for family relationships. I mean, he even blurts it out between mom and dad. And interestingly enough, When Jacob responds, he responds in a kind of a unique way. And he says, are you saying that your brothers and me and your mother are going to bow down before you? Now realize that Joseph's mother is Rachel, who has been dead for quite a while. But something has changed. Bilhah has taken a new position within the family. What about Leah? Leah was the first legal wife. Then Rachel came along, and that was favorite for Jacob. And now we've got Bilhah, who was the handmaid of Rachel, and she's moved up into this position rather than Leah. And how do we know that? Because when we go through the text, we find out that when Jacob sends his son out to discover where the kids are, it's interestingly enough that the scripture actually talks very clearly, very specifically about the brothers as being, let me see, I've got to make sure I got it in my notes. Because we've been doing a few other things, I've gone a little bit of ways from my notes. Let me get back here and make sure I got that.
A little?
All right. The particular brothers who were tattled on were not the sons of Jacob's legal wives, Leah and Rachel. They were the sons of Jacob's two concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. One thing I think we have to get, and, as a young man, I entertained the idea of how neat it'd be to have more than one wife. Well, after a few years of marriage and realizing you can't handle one, having more than one would be a disaster. And here we have the patriarchs with multiple wives, and especially Jacob, and the family dynamic is just off the wall. I mean, you got picking favorites, and then you got conflicts between families that even though Jacob is the father of everybody, the mother, the allegiance of sons is toward the mother primarily. And I mean, you got the five sons or six sons of Leah against everybody else. And, then you have the dynamic of, who was it? Reuben was disqualified. Simeon got disqualified. Levi got disqualified as being the head of the household. It comes down to Jacob. But then you have the problem between Judah and Joseph. And that problem that started in that conflict in the home continued throughout and is still a conflict today. Judah became the Jerusalem southern kingdom group of people. Ephraim, which is synonymous with Joseph, they became the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, northern kingdom fought against each other. Conflict. We still have today, and this might fit in with what you were alluding to, Frank, we have those that are occupying Jerusalem, Judah, if you will, and those that are scattered throughout the world. And they're in conflict. A lot of people do not believe that the nation of Israel, because it was not established by Messiah, they go, well, yeah, we're going to support it because it's there, but we don't think it's the real thing. And if you step back and look, and you realize the political intrigue that goes on, how the country's run, gee, uh, you wouldn't really know it was God's country too much because it's a small group of people that are zealous for God. And unfortunately, their zealousness for God is in conflict with what God has done in providing the one being, the one Messiah that can really accomplish what Israel wants to see accomplished, which is the return of God and his authority over all the earth. So, I mean, the conflict that started from this family, with the multiple wives being involved, and that dynamic, it just, man, it just blows your mind. And you know, I'm extremely grateful. And I know so many people have had this experience, unfortunately, of going through divorce and having multiple families having to blend together and fit together and work things out. You know, in the best of circumstances, that is still an underlying current of concern. You know, praise God. That wasn't my experience, but it still is an issue.
If somebody's gonna come in, you admit them, I've gotta get a charging cord, I'm running out of juice.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm going to be watching for new arrivals. We got a discharge problem. Okay. So let's see if we can move on here. Okay. I'll go back, make sure I got the notes. All right, number one, under B, we got B is Joseph's story, youthful exuberance and family intrigue. And then number one, to kill a dream. Sometimes dreams have to die to live. And, you know, that really is the experience of a lot of people that have dreams. God gives them a revelation of what they need to, they're going to be doing, what their family's going to be like, what this is going to be like. And, you know, life takes over. And if you let your dream go, that dream will die. But if that dream is given to you by God, even though it appears dead to you, God working behind the scenes, which is what divine providence is really about, he will resurrect that dream and bring it back to fruition. Now, we have the dreamer. He had these dreams, you know, that everybody's going to bow down before him, that all of this is going to take place. Well, the brothers took offense. They said, okay, let's get rid of this guy. And they were going to kill him. But, you know, he was thrown into a pit and sold to the Ishmaelites and taken into Egypt. His life was preserved, but he was gone, and they went back and they told Dad, hey, this coat that we find, do you recognize it? Everybody recognized it. You know, it's like, oh, I don't know if I've seen that before. Yeah, come on. It was a royal robe. Dad recognizes it's covered with goat's blood. And, you know, the sons are careful. They're going, well, we found this, you know. We didn't kill him. We just found it. It was covered with blood. So, anyway, Dad assumes, oh, wild animals tore him apart. He's gone, etc., etc. Well, everybody was assuming that Jacob would get over it. Now, I'm going to say this. When somebody you love dies, it's pretty hard to get over it. You know, it doesn't just happen, you know, well, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You must be over it by now. No. You might be able to control your emotions and come to a place where you understand what's going on and you can deal with it, but you're not, quote unquote, over it. And So Joseph, he's basically saying, I'll go down to the grave in sorrow, mourning over my son. And, the same with Rachel. He loved Rachel. He had his son. And so now he has Benjamin. And Benjamin plays into the same story, because what about Benjamin? When Joseph wanted Benjamin to be brought down to Egypt, Jacob's like, no way. I'm not giving up this boy. He's the only one I have left for my favorite wife. Not going to happen. So, anyway, with all of that, all of those things are always part of what goes on. Now, for those that know me, you already know patterns are a big deal for me. I see patterns everywhere in Scripture, and I always want to know what they're about. So, patterns is a fill-in for Joseph and Yeshua. They're a foretaste, and they foretold what's going to take place. If you look at the life of Joseph and Yeshua, we have 16 things here. I got 16? 15. 15 patterns that you can write down somewhere if you want. This is the first pattern. The hatred that the brothers had for Joseph grew progressively worse until it led to them wanting to kill him. For Yeshua, the hatred that the Jewish ruling leadership had for Yeshua grew worse and worse until it led them to arresting him and sentencing him to death. So we have Joseph and Yeshua, both of them having that. The second pattern, after sharing the dream he received from the Father, Joseph was rebuked by his earthly father. Yeshua was rebuked both by his earthly father and mother when he was about his father's business at the temple. Remember, they showed up and said, why are you doing this to us? And he said, well, you should know I'd be about my father's business. But he was rebuked by them because they were worried about him, of course. The third pattern, Joseph's dream predicted that Israel, Jacob, and his brethren would eventually bow down to him. The Bible predicts about Yeshua that at the end times all Israel and the nations will bow before Yeshua. Every knee will bow at the name of Yeshua. The fourth pattern, Joseph was sent on a mission from the father to his brethren. Yeshua was sent on a mission from his father to his brethren. Joseph was sent, go find your brothers. Yeshua has been sent by the Father. Go find your brothers. Provide for them the way to return. The fifth pattern, Joseph was sent to Shechem, a worldly and wicked place. Yeshua was sent to the earth. Need I say it? A wicked and worldly place. That's what the earth is like. The sixth pattern, Joseph was sent by his fathers to his brethren because they might be lost. Yeshua was sent by his father to seek the lost sheep of Israel. The seventh pattern, Joseph's brothers plotted how to kill Joseph from afar. The Jewish establishment plotted how to kill Yeshua from afar. How can we get rid of him? What can we do? The Romans, they can crucify him. Oh, okay, let's do that. Eighth pattern, Joseph's brothers wanted to kill Joseph for his dreams and his works. Yeshua was crucified for the words that he spoke, claiming that he was the Son of God. The ninth pattern, Reuben tried to appease his brothers so they wouldn't kill Joseph. Pontius Pilate tried to appease the Jewish audience so that they wouldn't kill Yeshua. Remember, he said, I find no fault in this man. And yet, what did they go? Crucify him! Crucify him! The 10th pattern. Joseph was cast into an empty pit. Yeshua was cast into an empty tomb. These patterns are just there. It's just one after the other. You can find them, see them. 11th pattern. Joseph was stripped of his coat. Yeshua was stripped of his robe. Remember? Took the robe off of him. after they'd mocked him, hit him in the head with a reed and all of that stuff. The 12th pattern, after Joseph was thrown into the pit, Joseph's brothers sat down and left him for dead. According to Matthew 27:36, after crucifying Yeshua, the soldiers sat down and kept guard as he lay there in the tomb. 11th pattern, Joseph was betrayed by Judah, one of the 12 brothers, for 20 pieces of silver. Yeshua was betrayed by Judas, one of the 12 disciples, for 30 pieces of silver. 14th pattern, Joseph had his coat dipped in blood. Yeshua was dressed in a robe dipped in blood. 15th pattern, Joseph's brothers lied about Joseph's death because he was alive. Following the resurrection, the Jewish leaders paid the guards to lie about the reason why Yeshua's tomb was empty, because he was also alive. 15 things that we can look at that compare Joseph's life with Yeshua's right here in this chapter. I mean, it's in this section of Scripture. So, as we move forward, there's going to be many, many amazing prophetic patterns. God used adversity to Joseph's life to prepare him for the future. Now, going back to our notes, here we have circumstances do not always indicate Jehovah's will. The circumstances of your life do not indicate that, oh, you must be out of God's will because this happened to you. Not always. God's underlying divine providence may be taking you to a place where you would not be able to go there without this happening in your life. And I mean, obviously we all claim anything that's negative that happens to us, that's the devil trying to do that to us. And that's okay, because he is the wicked one, he is the evil one, and he will do all of that stuff. But we also have to take time to realize that God has said himself, if there is a calamity in the city, he says, I have done it. Why? Because he has a plan and a purpose in his divine providence to change the direction and the course that either an individual or a people are on. He needs to move you from there to over here. We think, God wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, he would. Yes, he would. Because remember, we're on the earth to be his servants. We're not on the earth for him to be our servant. What he wants to do with the earth is to build a family from the people of the earth. And in order to do that, he will move things into its proper position, like a jigsaw puzzle, if you will, to make them cohesively fit together. And the key to it is, don't accuse God of being evil and wicked. We have to realize, you know what? Father, I don't understand this. And that's okay. You don't have to understand it. But you can be honest. I don't understand it. But I receive what you're doing. And I know you'll show me at some point. Maybe not even while I'm on this earth. But when I'm in your presence there, then I will know why you did this in my life. Yeshua on the cross, remember, said, Father, why are you forsaking me? Did he think God was evil? He already knew what was going to happen, but yet going through it, Father, why are you don't forsake me? Why are you forsaking me? All right. We got a lot to learn. All right, number 2 in our notes here under C, circumstances do keep us dependent. In other words, when you go through things that are, wow, who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters? I hope not. You better be calling on the name of the Lord. He keeps us dependent. All right, number 3, circumstances do prepare us for the future. I remember when I was a kid. My grandparents all died. All kinds of people died. I was at the funeral home. I think I kind of grew up in the funeral home. Lots and lots of people were dying that I loved, that I cared about. They were dying.
What?
And of course, why?
Of what?
Of what?
Of what?
I was a kid. I don't know. They just died. I mean, I had to hear at home when somebody had cancer, somebody had this, hardening of the arteries, whatever. Made no difference. They died. And it prepared me to understand that the reality of life is life doesn't go on forever. People die. And you need to take the time that if you're around people, take the time to spend with them so that you get to spend and say the things to them that you want to express, that you want to learn from them, that you want to share with them. Do it now. Don't think you can do it, in 20 years. There's like cats in the cradle, Oh, hey, Dad, thanks for the ball. Can we go play? Not today, son. I got lots to do. Well, that's okay, Dad. We'll get together then, Dad. I'm going to be just like you. Well, that get together then may never come to be because people grow up, they move away, things change.
Yeah, I don't think it did.
Do stuff now. Don't let the time go by. Don't let life pass by. I can think of 100 things right away that I wish I'd done with Sheila. Too late. I missed it. There are lots of things that I did. I have great memories. But there were other things that we always wanted to do, we didn't get around to doing. So don't let it pass you by. Don't let that happen. All right, chapter 38. Boy, we're really whipping it through here today.
I don't have the right connections. We're going to lose power.
Okay, all right. Well,
we'll probably be okay till about noon.
We'll do what we can do the best we can do it. And we'll believe that the Spirit of God is capable of speaking to everybody and encouraging us all. So, chapter 38, back in Canaan, family dynamics and covenant promises. All of a sudden, we're leaving Egypt, we're going all the way back, and we're going to get involved in the life of Judah. And the two main characters in chapter 38 are Judah and Tamar. The main purpose of chapter 38 is to show Judah's rise to prominence and the formulation of the messianic line from which King David and later Yeshua will originate. I mean, it's very important that we get that settled as to how it came about. Because with the focus being on Joseph, you'd think that somehow it would have worked out through Joseph, but no. God's plan was it will work out through Judah. Now, the very first verse here says, and it came about at that time, this is verse 1 in chapter 38, and it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hirah. Very interesting. Why did Judah depart from his brothers? I mean, here we have the brothers have already disqualified themselves, I think, at this point. And Judah, he's a natural one in line except for Joseph. And Joseph has already, the dream has already been killed on one side of it. He's been taken already down into Egypt. And so here we have good old Judah, and he takes a wife. What? Where did he get the wife? Oh my goodness. So Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite. We're getting into sex again. Warning, you want to turn off the screen. Judah takes a Canaanite. Now, what's the problem with that? Canaanites were absolutely forbidden to be part of the relationships between God's chosen people, the Israelites, and any of these groups. Don't want that, not going to let it happen. We already had the problem with Dinah and Shechem, that God interceded in that. That's why Simeon and Levi were disqualified. They decided to kill all the men of Shechem because they had relationships with Dinah, the daughter. All right? And that, we think, man, that was terrible. But God is adamant. He is not going to let that mixture take place this early in the gene pool. And he eliminated that problem. Divine providence? Did it cost Simeon and Levi? Mm-hmm. What Reuben was doing and sleeping with Jacob's concubine, that was all in order to facilitate him rising up in the ranks and having a relationship that he would secure his position as head of the family, which turned out to be absolutely opposite, and which accomplished again God's will, because God's will was through the line of Judah. God already knew at the end who was going to be who. Here at this onset, this beginning of the gene pool, he orchestrated what he wanted in order to facilitate his ultimate goal. I can guarantee you, I am here in this place right now because God orchestrated my removal from New York to here. I had no reason in the world to come to California. No relatives, no friends, nothing. And yet, God at 17 told me to go west. Okay. That's all. He didn't explain it. Didn't say you're going to be this, you're going to do that, nothing. He said go west. It never left my consciousness, my mind. Joining the service? Oh, well, go west. The service says, where do you want to go? I said east. Because I heard that in the service they'll give you the opposite of what you asked for. So I said, I want to go to New York. They sent me to California. Perfect. All right, so I went west. Then I had friends that I developed out here and got to know. And when I got out of the service, I decided to stay out here until a siren sounded in New York. And this girl that I'd known forever, I went back there and got involved with her. It didn't work out. That's when I met Sheila. And then I decided, well, I'm going back to California. So I came back. Sheila didn't, but she was going to come, and she did. So that's how I ended up here. But it's because I was sent. That's an important thing for me to realize, because I think sometimes, why do I keep hanging in here? I mean, California is not my home state. I guess it is now. I've been here over 40 years, but you know, I still have no family here per se. My children have moved out of state. So why do I persist in staying here? Because as far as I know so far, God said go west. This is as far west as I could get without treading water. And I wasn't about to swim. I figured, well, you know, this is good enough. So until he tells me something different, I'm here. And it facilitates what he wants in whatever way he wants it. It's still a question in my mind, and probably in a lot of other people's minds too. Why are you here? Well, I don't know entirely, but I know I'm here for the duration. So, Judah's conflict with Joseph, the rightful versus the favored. That's part of our notes. Judah's conflict with Joseph, the rightful versus the favored. Judah, because of all of the disqualifications of his other brothers, he became the first in line of the sons of Leah, who actually, going all the way back, and you got to look at divine providence as well, it was Rachel that Jacob was all about. And yet God goes, hey, we're going to do a little thing here. And so Leah gets to get into the tent, and, for whatever reason, for me, it's hard for me to get this. I think I'm probably going to look, see who's here with me. I mean, were they twins? I mean, were they so perfectly alike you couldn't tell the difference? Well, it doesn't matter, because the story is God's providence says, no, Leah's going to be the one. And from Leah, by the way, is going to be the line that eventually leads to Messiah Yeshua. Divine providence working, wow, blows your mind, the intrigue that's here when you start putting it together and you start seeing it. So anyway, but Judah had a conflict because the favorite son of the father obviously was Joseph. And so boom, 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 what's going on with this? As I said earlier, Judah became the leader of the southern kingdom, Jerusalem, Israel. That's where Judah is basically based. Ephraim, the son of Joseph, who represents Joseph, by the way. Interestingly enough, I asked this question, and you might consider this too. How come Joseph did not ever become what we would call a patriarch? Because he's certainly a prominent character in this whole scenario and story. And again, like I said, the things I mentioned earlier are the three reasons that I look at as to why he didn't become. But anyway, then Ephraim is northern. He represents the northern 10 tribes, those that are scattered everywhere throughout the world. That's in our notes there. I just want to make sure you got that. Okay, A and or B in our notes, actually, I got two A's, but the second A, I overlooked that. Disqualification, ascension, and you married who? What were you thinking, Judah? You want to be the head of the family, and you run out and you marry a Canaanite? Really? You disqualify your offspring. You disqualify your position of being the line through which God is going to bring Messiah. They didn't know this, of course. This wasn't something they understood, but they certainly understood the importance of what God was saying to them. Do not intermarry with these people. And he rebelled against it and married some beautiful, good-looking Canaanite woman. I mean, I get it. All guys are attracted to certain types of women. And you run across them and they're friendly, you're liable to go into them. What does that mean? Well, it means simply, in case you haven't figured it out, it means you have sex. All right? And if you have sex, this is why I'm not shying away from this. When you have sex with anybody, what does Scripture say about that? You become one. You become one with that person. Now, in the 60s, for those of us that grew up in the 60s and embraced that lifestyle, 15, 20, 30, 60, how many ones have you been joined to? Nobody's volunteering a number, but and you don't need to. The point is, if you had sex with somebody, you have joined yourself to them. And that needs to be broken off at some point. I went through deliverance and had to have that broken off because I still had a very strong connection with a person that I had had a relationship with for a long time before I married Sheila. And that needed to be broken because the thoughts were still there. The memories were fresh. It was like, oh, the connection's still there. And it's a spiritual thing. And it has to be broken. If you don't break it, you don't just outgrow it. It's still there. So, the idea being, if you join yourself to a Canaanite and you're Israel, the spiritual connection that takes place is a mixture. Remember how God is so adamant about anti-mixture? He doesn't want things mixed. And if you're talking about a spiritual mixture, that's even worse than the physical mixtures that God has forbidden. So, Canaanite mixture with an Israelite disqualifies everything that comes from it. And so, Judah went in, a son was born, whatever. He's dead now, doesn't matter. Second son was born. He was called to take the place of the first son who God killed because he was so wicked. And God did kill him. There's no kidding around here. God took him out. And Tamar was the woman that was married to this son. Now, Tamar, we're going to find out if you follow and believe at all the history that's recorded by the rabbinical writings, is very strongly promoted that she was a daughter of Shem. True or not, you know what? I don't know, but I know this. God is very particular about the heritage and the genealogical lineage that runs through and comprises the heritage of Messiah Yeshua. So I'm inclined to believe that she was indeed a daughter of Shem, or somebody of righteous lineage. She wasn't a Canaanite. She wasn't a Moabite. She wasn't one of those things. She was a daughter that was from the right heritage. And she married the son of Judah, but he had a Canaanite mother or wife that was the mother of the son, and the son was so wicked, God took him out. Divine providence. The second son was called by Judah and said, go into your brother's wife, into Tamar, and marry her and raise up sons for your brother. Well, that's Levirate marriage. Now, Levirate marriage had nothing to do with the tribe of Levi. It had nothing to do with it at all. Levirate marriage took place in the Moabite in different cultures. It had nothing to do with the Levites. It just meant, and by the way, if you look in Latin, what it means is husbands. But anyway, the idea was that you would go in as a younger brother and father children through your older brother's wife. And that son would be the firstborn, and he would inherit the inheritance of the firstborn. Okay? Well, for the second son, it's like, hey, wait a minute. If I father a son through Tamar, then that son will get the inheritance of the firstborn, and me being the secondborn, I don't get that, and I'll miss out. So what he did is, he went in and had sex with Tamar, all right. I mean, that's the good part. But instead of impregnating her, he pulled out and spilled his seed on the ground. God is, and this is sexual, but God says it's better to spend your seed in the belly of a prostitute than it is to spit it out on the ground. God doesn't shy away from stuff. He just says it the way it is. It's better to do it in the belly of a whore than it is to spit it out on the ground. Onan spit it out on the ground. Guess what? God not happy. Number 2 son, gone. Number 3 son, Judah's going, hey, I fathered 3 sons. 2 of them have already died. And I'm not going to send Shechem, or what is it? Is it Shelah? I think it's Shelah, the name. It's very close to Sheila, Shelah, something like that. And I'm not going to send him in. He's going to die too. And so Tamar waits for Judah to do the right thing. He never gets around to doing it. The boy grows up into a man. He doesn't, you got to figure everybody's growing up. So Tamar's getting older. The son was too young, and he grows to manhood where he can start to father children, probably after the age of 20. And, Judah is not sending him in. And so Tamar goes, hey, this isn't right. To not have children was a big affront to any woman at that time. Today we got women wanting to kill babies. We don't want babies. We want to kill them. Get rid of the babies. At this time in the Bible, everything is about, it's an affront if you don't have children. Children are precious before the Lord. And so the idea was if you didn't have them, then there was basically almost a curse on you. And so Tamar's like, I'm not putting up with this. I need to give birth to a legitimate child, a son. And so, number 1, Judah's Canaanite sons prove unacceptable. Number 2, Tamar behind the veil. Tamar hears that Judah is going to go up and shear the sheep. His wife has died. That's important to know. The Canaanite wife died. And so now he's without a wife, and time has passed, and he's still a virile individual, and so he's feeling as though, I need to find me a girl. So what does he do? On his way up, he comes to a village. He sees somebody there with a veil. And he approaches her and makes an agreement. Now, this is important for us to understand. In our culture today, going out to a prostitute is definitely frowned upon. Oh, that's terrible, that's bad, blah, 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 and all of that. Now, at this time, it wasn't what you wanted to do first off. But it was not frowned upon as it is today. The reason sex today in the Christian community and in our community, especially America is much worse than Europe and Asia and different countries. They still have different opinions. But in America, because of Gnosticism, where Gnosticism always considers the flesh to be evil. Oh, you have a desire of the flesh, it must be evil. Totally evil. And so Augustine, who basically was a Gnostic and brought Gnosticism within the Christian theology, he's the one that promoted this. He was so much so, he didn't even want to have relationships with his own wife because he thought it was such an evil thing. Yes, Pastor.
Just so everyone knows, we're going to be shutting down in about 5 minutes.
Really?
I'm out of juice. So, and I can't find the fixtures to charge this here. So.
Okay,
so I don't know whether you want to fill in the rest of the blanks or just go, but just so everybody in
Okay.
Zoomland knows it's going to be just the whole screen is going to go black in about 5 minutes.
Happy trails. All right. So let's just keep this in context and make it really quick. Tamar behind the veil. She puts herself out there as a prostitute. Judah goes into her, impregnates her. All right. He wants to kill her, but then he realizes, wait a minute, when she exposes who is the father of the child she's carrying, he goes, well, she's more righteous than me. Not considering God, but realizing he didn't do the right thing, and what her deception was, now he's not going to kill her. All right, so just bring that up. But filling in the notes, Kedishah, there's two kinds of prostitutes. One's a cultic prostitute. Zona is a common prostitute. A common prostitute would just have a veil over, and if you had relationships with her, you knew what you were doing, she knew what she was doing, and it was what it was. But if you went to a cultic prostitute, you took on the spiritual connection, and that was absolutely forbidden for an Israelite to do. To participate in common prostitution, not that big of a deal. For us, it's a big deal because of Gnosticism, our social structure, what we've come to believe, etc. I'll leave it there. There's a lot more I'd like to say about it, but in 5 minutes, we can't get there. So, number 1 in chapter 39, this is about the shepherd kings. You remember the Hyksos, they were the ones that came to Egypt and conquered Egypt, and they were the Ishmaelites, Semites, from the east that came to Egypt and ran Egypt while Joseph was in Egypt. That's why he was promoted so much as opposed to an Egyptian. Now, Potiphar in chapter 39, when you begin reading there, it said, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian. Why would the scripture identify him as an Egyptian? You would think everybody in Egypt was an Egyptian, but it's not true. He was identified as an Egyptian to indicate that there were Egyptians in high positions. And Potiphar absolutely was in a high position. He was the captain of the bodyguard. Now, that figures in very prominently as well. We'll do our notes. We'll get to that. Number 1, Yahweh was with Joseph. You can see that in verse 2, 3, 21, and 23. Then you have Joseph's temptation in response to Potiphar's adulterous wife. And then A in our notes, how could I do such an evil thing against Yahweh? This was Joseph's response. It wasn't against Potiphar. It wasn't against himself. It was against Yahweh. Anything evil, he considered it against Yahweh himself. And how could he do it? Sleeping with this woman and saying, come unto me. All right. Potiphar's anger burned. But against who? If it was against Joseph, he was the captain of the guard. He could have put him to death in an instant. But he didn't put him to death. All right. I'm going to skip 5 ways Joseph's life foreshadows Yeshua. And we're going to go to chapter 40 and ask this question. What kind of prison is this in which Joseph was placed in? Because what we have is we find out that when he was cast into prison, he was cast into the prison of the captain of the guard's house. What kind of prison is that? The captain of the guard had him running his whole estate, and now his wife accuses him. His anger burned against who? Not against Joseph, against his wife. He understood his wife. Joseph is put in charge and in the prison that is the house of the captain of the guard. This is like you got a special prison? We're going to have you over here. The cupbearer and the baker, they showed up where? In the house of the captain of the guard, in that prison. These were important people. They weren't in a dungeon filled with rats and excrement. They were being held until Pharaoh made a decision as to what was going to happen to them. They were under house arrest. Read it carefully. It's right there. You can't miss it if you're awakened to it. All right, that's 39, chapter 40. What we have is the dreamers, A in our notes, the dreamers of dreams hear from the dreamer. They're dreaming, and the dreamer goes, hey, guess what? Interpretation of dreams belong to God. We can go and talk about dreams and how important they were in this culture. We don't have time, but we'll do it at some point. All right. Similar is not the same. In other words, the baker's dream and the cupbearer's dream were similar, but they were not the same. And to say the devil is in the details. Pharaoh took the cup, but who ate the bread? The birds ate the bread, not Pharaoh. Big difference. The result was not good. All right, that's one in our notes. Pharaoh drinks, birds eat. And then 6 ways life for Joseph's life foreshadows Yeshua in chapter 40. Now, we still on?
We're 8%.
So, we're still on, sort of, kind of?
We're good for now.
All right, let me get over here then.
7 minutes.
All right. You know, there's so much in all of these portions of Scripture. 5 ways where Joseph's life foreshadows Yeshua's life. Now, I'll say this, and this is important for us to get this in your memory. Knowledge not absorbed is knowledge not learned. If you don't absorb knowledge, you haven't learned it. In other words, you can hear it, but it's in one ear and out the other, and next week you forgot everything about what it is you just talked about. And knowledge not learned is knowledge that cannot be applied. If you don't absorb it so that you know that you know that you know it, you can't apply it. It's so important that we get these concepts and this idea. All right, this is a pattern. This is the truth that kind of goes with it. Yeshua said this in John 5. He said, if you really believe Moses, you would believe me. This is that concept. Knowledge absorbed absolutely has to be stuff that is learned. All right? So, pattern 1. All things are committed to Joseph by his master. All things were committed to Yeshua by his Father in heaven. Pattern 2. Joseph had his garment stripped from him. Yeshua also had his garment stripped from him before he was tortured. Pattern 3. Joseph was falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit. Yeshua was also falsely accused for blasphemy. Pattern 4. Joseph did not defend himself against the charges. And so did Yeshua remain silent in front of his accusers. Pattern 5, Joseph was given favor in the sight of both God and man. And in Luke 2:52, Yeshua grew both in wisdom and in stature, gaining favor both with other people and with God. All right, then the final one. I mean, all of these patterns are here. It's one after the other in this portion of Scripture. In chapter 40, Joseph was in prison next to 2 criminals. On the cross, Yeshua was crucified between 2 criminals. Pattern 2, according to Joseph, 1 prisoner perishes and 1 is saved. The same with Yeshua. One perishes, the other is saved. Pattern 3. Joseph foretells the raising up after 3 days. Yeshua foretells his resurrection to life again after 3 days. Pattern 4. Joseph tells the cupbearer to remember him after he's raised up. Yeshua tells his disciples at communion, or what we see as the Last Supper, he said, raise up this cup in remembrance of me. Pattern 5. Joseph tells the cupbearer and baker that he has done nothing to be put in the dungeon. Pilate tells the crowd Yeshua had done nothing to be put on the cross. Pattern 6. Joseph had 2 dreams with 2 elements, the cupbearer's cup and the baker's bread. Yeshua had 2 elements at the Last Supper, the communion cup and the bread. So with these patterns, the patterns are just in your face. And this is only to chapter 40. There are more patterns coming in chapter 41. And don't forget, it runs all the way to chapter 50, this whole teaching about Joseph. It's just, there's so much here if we just sit down and carefully read it and consider that this is all a foreshadowing of what is going to take place with Yeshua. When we read the text, the scripture, we can realize that everything in the text is telling us how things are going to take place in our future with the coming of Messiah. It's phenomenal. God's word is so rich, and there's so much here. If we, to me, it's fun. How much can we find? What can we learn? We all, we have 3 pastors, and all 3 of us approach teaching from this Torah time. We do it differently. Some people say, well, I'm going to take a subject, and I really want to focus on that subject. Others take it from the rabbinical perspective and say, this is what the rabbis say, this is what they believe, this is what they did. I take it from the standpoint of this is all patterns for us to recognize, to see that God is doing this. And all of these things, hopefully every bit of this will be an encouragement to you to realize as you go through things in life, they may seem absolutely horrendous. Why did this have to happen? But realize that God overall has an absolute purpose and plan, that he's going to take you from where you are and mold you. And remember, we got the potter. Is the clay supposed to say to the potter, why are you doing this to me this way? Well, the clay doesn't determine what the potter does. The clay just gets to conform to what the potter is doing. And that's what we have to recognize. God's taking us through things. And, he's not going to leave us. He's not going to forsake us. He's going to be right there with us the whole way. Whether we see him or don't see him, just recognize that you are and I and all of us are in his hands. He has an ultimate goal. And when Yeshua came, I remember I used to take all the Bibles I would ever get. In Romans 10:4, where it says, erroneously by the way, it says that Yeshua was the end of the Torah. That is not a good translation at all. And every Bible that said that, I used to throw them out. I just throw them out because you can't get this right. Yeshua is the goal of Torah. He's not the end of it. He is the goal. So to me, whenever I'm reading through Torah, the concept in the Tanakh, and the Brit Hadashah, obviously, but everything about it is, it's the goal. Yeshua is the goal. So what's the pattern? Where is the identification mark? Where can we see how it's supposed to work? Where can we be encouraged to realize that my faith, when the king is wandering in the field, like Joseph wandered in the field, will he find faith on the earth? My desire is to make sure in every way possible that not only I can have some faith, but I can exhort, encourage, and build up my brothers and sisters that they can have faith. That when Yeshua comes looking, he'll find that faith in you. And that's our study for this week.